thank you all for joining us today. And especially thanks for the Society for organising such an amazing event. And I love that it's called a celebration. It's just so refreshing to see the Society evolve and offering such a collaboration of resources to offer such a synergistic approach to supporting conditions like vitiligo. You know, many of you, this may resonate. There's so many layers, and it's more than just one stance into, supporting your journey through this, which is why I just love, what the Society do. For me, especially in clinic, it's just great to have that multi-level support. It's just so imperative in building that relationship with yourself. It's such a struggle post-diagnosis to just find your feet and just sort of finding the newfound you. So I'm really looking forward to listening to Erika, who's going to explore social belonging, body confidence by Nina, and also self-confidence, self-deprecation and mindset with Natalie Jones. All of these, they are, just such an integral part of our health. Health and well-being, despite what I do, goes beyond our plate. But today I am going to go and explore food, mood and gut, exactly like Natalie said, in the time I have available. So if you have any questions, please hold them towards the end or after each short. I'm sure Natalie is going to guide us, and I hope it proves helpful. So, here we go. Right, a little bit about me. Natalie's given a little bit of an intro already, but just to elaborate, I'm a bank registered nutritional therapist and coach, and what that basically means, I've undergone a certain level of training and clinical hours to, one, achieve my accreditation, but to also remain on the nutritional therapist register. So a lot of our training is revolved around science-based evidence. So everything that I'm going to be presenting today is all kind of based on meta-analysis and clinical studies. A little bit about myself. I graduated as a graphic designer, marketing, did a bit of criminology and psychology. However, like Natalie explained, I have multiple autoimmune conditions, and vitiligo being one, which was diagnosed over 20 years ago. Also suffer with, 2 forms of lupus. So I really get the crutches of how chronic disease can really impact your life and everything that comes and lives alongside it. However, the pinnacle point for me was when I was diagnosed with celiac disease. For those who might not be familiar, celiac disease is when you have a true allergy to gluten. And it took years for my diagnosis, but as I explained, that was when I organically sort of changed my dietary choices, my lifestyle interventions, and became a bit of a guinea pig on myself on what worked and what didn't. However, it really changed for me when I eventually went on to have my son, who's now 9 years old, who also developed, celiac disease and had multiple food allergies. Went on to study at CNM and graduated, and here I am. Got my clinical practice in Surrey, work remotely. I work for the Penny Hill Park and do various work with schools, teaching about nutrition and well-being. It's my details. It's go on. Whoops, one too far, too far. Sorry. There we go. Shifting the way we think. So before I go on, I think I just want to really sort of emphasize that there is no sort of cure for autoimmune. So everything that's going to be put out today is for us to sort of really embrace our immune systems. We have a unique immune system, and it's our body's way of signaling something's just not right. All of this is to, one, sort of keep us in remission, and 2, prevent other autoimmune conditions coming on. As you all are probably aware, once you have one autoimmune condition, we have that predisposition to sort of switch other autoimmune conditions on. And throughout this presentation, you're going to sort of see me sort of referring to parts of the body. But what I really want to hone in and recognize is our body does not work in isolation. We're going to be talking a lot about the gut and the mind. And I just sort of really want to emulate and emphasize that, they just communicate so synergistically, intricately, and it relies on so many things like nutrients, cofactors, And, the food we eat really shape our thoughts, actions, and behaviors. So quite often, we use food as a pacifier. I mean, if you think back from infancy, when we're born, babies are fed to be kept quiet. And generally those behavior patterns just continue throughout life. So food really is such a huge part of our lifestyle. If we feed it well, it can thrive. But undernourishing it or overfeeding ourselves and our body with low nutrient-dense food, it can really depress its functioning. And so today we're going to look at how certain compounds can boost our brain power to help us feeling great. And relative to what I was saying earlier on about our body working together and not in isolation, I really want to hone in with the gut and the brain. Whilst they're two separate entities and housed in two different areas in our body, they are actually connected via the enteric nervous system known as the gut-brain axis. And it's connected by the biggest nerve in our system called the vagus nerve, which has a two-way sort of synergistic, it sends signals both ways. We also know much of our serotonin, which once used to be thought as a neurotransmitter just within our brain, we actually store more than 90% of that in our gut. So the gut immunity it just cannot be sort of underestimated. It's, a two-way street. Quite often our gut is actually referred to as the second brain. I just want you to hold on to that thought as I work through following slides. Here we go. Information. I'm also going to be referring a lot to inflammation, and we tend to think of inflammation as localized pain, joint pain, a pulled muscle, more of an acute response. However, the tail of inflammation, it's actually a crucial part of our body system. We need inflammatory responses to naturally protect ourselves. So, for example, if we cut our finger, we need the inflammatory response to sort of come to the site of inflammation and protect it for things like infection. So it's a great thing to have. The issue arises for when we sort of fall into the category of chronic inflammation. And that's kind of sort of really pushed through with things like cigarette smoke, the Western diet, chronic disease, stress, environment. So it's not this sort of acute response that I'm going to be referring to today. It's more something that happens over a long period of time and potentially years. And it's that ongoing sort of knock-on effect that sort of alludes to this chronic inflammation in our body, which is now linked to all sorts of diseases like cancer, heart disease, neurodegenerative diseases, autoimmunity, gut disorders, and mental health being one of them. Mental health is such a significant part of inflammation, and that's what I'm going to be really focusing on today. Okay, you quite often hear buzzwords like free radicals and antioxidants, and really want to just focus on what they are. So free radicals, they're essentially unstable compounds that potentially cause damage to our cells and everything around it. And these free radicals, they're sort of produced all the time. And a lot like inflammation, they're a great thing to have. We need free radicals in our body. They are a part of our natural defense system and metabolism, and we actually need them within our body for those metabolic processes. Equally, our body has a built-in antioxidant system as well, which regulate these free radicals so they don't cause our body any harm. So we need the free radicals for signaling, and we need to be exposed to them. However, when we've been exposed to them for a long-term a period of time, and I'm talking to things like pollution, genetics plays a part as well, cigarette smoke, chronic disease, stress, the balance and ratio between the free radicals and antioxidants just becomes so inflamed, and we end up in a state of oxidative stress. How that then affects our brain is our brain is particularly susceptible to oxidative stress, and that's because it's so metabolically active. We're using it all the time. And it's also high in lipids, fats. Brain 60% of fats. And if you sort of I'm going to use the analogy of a block of butter. If it's left out under the sun and we've got heat, it's going to go rancid. It's going to taste off. It's kind of going to produce all these free radicals because it's exposed to the light. And essentially that's what our body is. Anything that's exposed to a lot of these free radicals becomes damaged over a period of time. And studies have found people with depression and neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's, depression, anxiety, have higher levels of oxidative stress than to those comparison in cohort studies. And respectively, we also know that people on antidepressant therapy have reduced levels of oxidative stress. And how diet plays a key role in this is, if we have a whole food diet, they have all these compounds, these beautiful compounds that we're going to go on to discuss, and they come in all different shapes and sizes to reduce and manage the balance between the free radicals and the antioxidants. We're talking about compounds like vitamin C, vitamin E, minerals like selenium, protein-rich foods like cysteine, which are building blocks for antioxidants, healthy fats like fish, nuts, seeds, cold-pressed olive oils, probiotics available in fermented foods, which we'll go on to speak about as well. And those essentially are all sort of extrapolated from a whole food diet. So polyphenols and flavonoids, terms you might be all familiar with. So what are polyphenols? So the bioactive compounds found in various concentrations in all types of foods, food groups. But before I touch on that, on how it sort of impacts and is beneficial for mental health and brain health, polyphenols are also sort of responsible for things like color of our food. So it's the reason why blueberries have that sort of bluey, purpley pigment to it and all those wonderful hues. And they're also responsible for flavor. So if you think of a really good quality olive oil and the stringency and the burn on the back of your throat, so that's what polyphenols are. So they give the food its characteristics and its taste and its color. And it's the anti-inflammatory properties, which has been a large area of research. And it has a strong connection to our gut microbiome, which has this bidirectional process where the composition of our microbiome, which is the good bacteria in our gut, actually influences the way these polyphenols behave in our body. So it's quite fascinating. So how it might behave in one person will be completely different to the other. And so, I mean, the way to kind of look at polyphenols is they can act as sort of prebiotics. So if you imagine your lawn, that's probiotics, which is the good bacteria. The polyphenols feed this good bacteria. So it's almost like fertilizer feeding the grass. And it's helping all these good bacteria thrive in our body. And it's these good bacteria that really have this profound effect on immune regulation. You know, sort of it's amazing for cognition, reducing anxiety, depression. And it's also being extensively explored for chronic disease, especially sort of conditions like vitiligo, heart health, and, you know, rightly so, while we're here today, things like depression and mental well-being. So much of the research has been focused on the role of these specific subclasses of polyphenols. For example, what I'm going to be speaking about today is the flavonoids. So if you think of polyphenols as the umbrella term, and underneath all those polyphenols, we have all sorts of subclasses, but the one I'm going to focus on today is flavonoids. And those are type of polyphenols found in spices, fruits like pomegranate, berries, especially blueberries and the dark berries. More and more studies are showing like the different rates of polyphenols result in up to 40% reduction in rates of depression in cohorts who had consumed higher levels of polyphenols. So that just goes to sort of express, you know, how life-changing it can be. So incorporating just these simple measures, it can have substantial life-changing effects for people. So some of the sources, like I said, we've got the berries, and we really want to utilize, in the UK, we've got, such seasonal availability for these berries. So it's a really good idea to sort of freeze your berries, keep them, not only the berries, but the fruits and vegetables, seasonal fruits and vegetables, freezing them retains all the vitamins, and they're sort of released once you defrost them again, and they're readily available. Things like matcha green tea, spices, turmeric. I mean, I think that's just infamous. She's like the queen of anti-inflammatory properties, as with cinnamon, and herbs and spices. They contain such an abundance of these beautiful polyphenols to help reduce inflammation in our body. So, in addition to these beautiful compounds, another area of research is held for omega-3 fatty acids. You may see the terms EPA and DHA. And that's also being sort of recognized for its bioactive compounds. And it's these types of fatty acids, like I said, known as EPA and DHA, primarily responsible for its effect on mental health and cognition. But furthermore, it's kind of also being recognized for chronic conditions like heart disease, depression, as we're speaking, inflammation to the joints. It's great for hormonal health. It's recognized for a whole array of things, but it's extensively been researched for mental health. And there's several mechanisms for how it's proven beneficial. But the one that's most understood is its immune modulating factors and the compounds in there. Again, holding on to the fact that inflammation isn't always just acute. It's really important to sort of recognize mental health is a real driver for depression and anxiety, and have sort of, cohorts that have shown that have higher inflammatory markers. Studies have shown populations who consume the highest amount of omegas through, the fish, nuts and seeds, olive oil, have sort of lower rates of depression. There's countless randomized controlled trials to show supplementation of high strength omega-3 fatty acids, fish oil, so to speak, is an important intervention in management of depression. I'm going to caveat that because going back to what I was referring to, healthy fats being very prone to oxidation, not all supplements are equal. And a great way to sort of recognize a good product from a bad, especially with the fish oil, is if it sort of smells rancid and you're getting that real sort of fishy taste, it's probably been heat extracted. Is what we want to avoid. We want to go for the cold extraction, so we're preserving all those beautiful beneficial oils to reap all those therapeutic effects for it. For those of you who don't sort of really like the fish supplements and might be vegan or vegetarian or just prefer an alternative, the EPA and DHA is actually derived from the algae. The fish eat the algae. So you're still going to reap all those beautiful beneficial effects from a vegan supplement. So that's great to hold in mind. One slide too far. Okay, what is a whole food diet? Essentially, it's sort of keeping minimal of sort of the Western diet, a minimal sort of consumption of nutrient low processed foods, and maximizing your nutrient intake from these natural sources of foods, avoiding things like processed food, ready-made meals, pre-packed meals. They're all highly processed with salts, refined sugars, carbohydrates, which have all this fiber stripped away from it. Now, whole food diet mainly includes plant-based foods such as fruits and vegetables, your nuts and seeds, lentils, pulses, and whole grains, and a small amount of animal foods such as your eggs, your fish, your meat, your poultry. And also it's so important to include the healthy fats. We have sort of evolved into sort of making this real sort of negative association with fats. And yes, that's right to a certain degree when it comes to vegetable oils and highly processed fats. That's true. However, we really need to hold on to the fact that healthy fats are essential for our body. Our cells are made up with membranes from healthy fats. Our brain is comprised of healthy fats. We need to obtain these from cold pressed oils, grass-fed butter, fish, nuts, and seeds. And there's also this sort of, I just want to myth bust a bit, sort of having a high level of all these antioxidants in sort of what we now call the term superfoods isn't always necessarily a great thing, especially for us with autoimmune disease, because we already have an overactive immune system, and we want to sort of quieten that down. And yes, essentially that is, taking a lot of the oxidative stress. And yes, whilst there's a place for supplementation, whilst we're in a state of inflammation to absorb all the nutrients, etc., we really actually want to focus on a whole food diet and getting all our nutrients and needs and body needs from eating whole foods. Sorry, keep doing this. Here we go. Okay, what diet is best? I get this asked countlessly. And the one thing I want to say, it's not necessarily about do's and don'ts and what you should and shouldn't be doing. And it's more about having a pragmatic stance. So thinking, let's say, I don't know, if you're sort of generally having a Western diet, which is the fast foods, etc., and convenience foods, having the 3 spoonfuls of olive oil, which is really high in polyphenols, isn't necessarily going to improve your overall health. It's more about what you're eating across, a week, a month, a year. So we really want to sort of include sort of all those beautiful foods we've just discussed, and focusing on those plant-based foods, having smaller amounts of the meats, and including the wonderful spices and the beans and the extra virgin olive oil. But it's also equally important to recognize, if you occasionally have that slice of cake, that's not going to ruin your mental health. It's not going to put you in a massive amount of sort of inflammation. We really need to sort of build a healthy relationship with food and ourselves. And so, yeah, sort of really having a healthy sort of stance on that, and not being so hard on yourself if you do fancy that slice of cake. And it's just having an overall broad spectrum, multi-level of food nutrients, having a broad spectrum of microbiome going through all these food groups. Essentially, a lot of the studies are kind of around the Mediterranean style of eating, and that is because it contains seasonal foods. It's the Mediterranean style of eating includes sort of local grown foods, a high rate of omega-3s, fish, plant-based foods, and actually a glass of wine. And the main thing being there is that social satiation, sitting down together, enjoying a meal together. That is a real important factor in bolstering our immune system. Studies have shown countlessly that these diets can help across all age groups. So it's really more focusing on getting these compounds from a whole food diet rather than just one single food. That said, there's loads of diets that have shown promise to health and degenerative diseases, including mental health, well-being. The Okinawa diet, Nordic diet, Ayurvedic diet, they all show promising results. And the underlying feature of all these diets working is the fact that they all have one thing in common. They're all rich in plant-based foods. They're all sort of reduced and have very minimal processed foods in their diet. They're high in omega fats. So it's really important to use this as a rough guideline, and just sort of appreciate the fact that we as human beings, we need to have that flexibility, and we shouldn't really be rigid. And these diets are there just to sort of guide us through, and things like, going out socializing and actually enjoying a meal is equally as important as incorporating all these lovely compounds and polyphenols into our diet. Okay, key nutrients. So I often get asked, what should I be taking? Is there anything that can sort of help my, vitiligo or whatever the health concern in clinic might be? And for obvious reasons, diet is always going to be there. There's meta-analysis studies that have been continuously being, explored and studied. And the biggest one included 4 million participants, actually. And that showed the Western diet, including sort of things like the saturated fats, highly processed foods, being high in sugar and salt consumption, were all associated with a whole range of chronic diseases, including depression and mental well-being. We really want to work on, priming that immune system. And that extends beyond a plate. We're talking about sleep, that is so integral for our immune system, and our food choices, actually, that social connection, stress management, exercising, environmental factors, like engaging with nature. They're all calming for our nervous system. Exercise, again, it's associated with improvement of inflammatory markers, neurogenesis. It actually influences our microbiome that we spoke about earlier, and all that good bacteria. It raises our endorphins, all our happy hormones. That outdoors, it's associated with absorbing all vitamin D, which, we all know in the back of COVID, that's been so imperative for immune health. And it's also, it has a direct ramification in a positive way for boosting our mood and making us feel more energized. And being outdoors, again, in nature, it naturally shows our endorphin levels raised and increases neurogenesis, which is the growth of our brain cells. So health really does go beyond the plate. In terms of sleep, it's when our body repairs, and how it can impact our food choices it's just incredible how our body regulates. And this goes back to our body working synergistically. So eating too late in the evening can impact our melatonin, sleep hormone, to not rise as it naturally should. So then what happens as a repercussion of that is our hunger hormone and our satiated hormone, leptin and ghrelin, which are neuropeptides in our brain, are not allowed to sort of regulate as they would. So in the morning, when you wake up and you're feeling sort of tired and you just want something really quick to just give you that energy, you're going to go for something poorly created. It's not going to be rich in protein. It's going to be higher in caffeine and sugar. So what then happens, that puts a huge amount of pressure on our pancreas, and it sends our blood sugar regulation AWOL. And that pattern will just kind of emulate through the day. So we're constantly going for the biscuit, for the Red Bull, for the caffeine, to just get our energy levels going higher. And all that's doing is adding to that anxiety. It's putting an overabundance of stress on our insulin level, again, making us feel hungry, and then just having a knock-on effect on our sleep cycle. But then, because we've got all this caffeine in our body and all this pressure on our liver, and it's not able to downregulate when it's supposed to, which is in the evening when the digestive system slows down, to give you a nice restorative sleep where your body naturally just detoxifies and repairs. So you can really see how the body is integrated as one, and it has a knock-on effect, and how everything just needs to be working synergistically for wholeness. And these are important lifestyles that we need to be working towards. In terms of supplementation and nutrients, one of my favorite ones, I would have to say, it's been studied quite a bit actually, is lavender oil as a dietary supplement. It's actually shown to reduce anxiety symptoms in capsule form. And green tea, it's one I go, and it's just not only beneficial across the board for so many inflammatory markers, but it's actually got a compound in there called L-theanine. And that's a great sort of compound for signaling stress and anxiety. Buddhists traditionally used to use it to actually calm down to get them into that meditative state. So it's a real nice one to just incorporate in your diet. Evidence has also shown minerals like zinc supplementation is a great intervention in reducing clinical depression. And the reason being is the brain holds the highest amount of concentration of zinc, especially in the part of the brain known as the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning, memory, mood control. And it can actually sort of influence signaling things like BDNF, which is responsible for neurogenesis, the growth of our brain cells. So that's a good one to have it. Or I would also caveat that one because you want to get the right dosage so you're not knocking off copper, which again goes back to sort of working synergistic and getting a whole food diet, getting as much as you can through diet as well. Folate is also associated with mood. It's involved in a whole host of things actually, and many of you may be sort of familiar with folic acid. However, in studies, it's the folate form which has shown therapeutic effect, and it's closely related to mental health well-being because of its production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which are related to mental health. Going back to folic acid, it's not as effective. I mean, you're going to see higher strengths of that because it's not as bioavailable for our body. It's not easily absorbed by our body. The one that's most bioavailable in studies is methylfolate, and that's been shown to be more effective in cognition and mental well-being. But essentially, I mean, you've heard the narrative here now. So we want to be getting most of our nutrients through diet, which is through the long-chain fatty acids of omega-3s, through fish, nuts and seeds, through B vitamins, through your whole grains, folate through your greens, vitamin D, maybe not so much through food. You can get it definitely from sort of things like yogurt, etc. And for those that have really committed, mushrooms under sunlight, you can sort of get an abundance of vitamin D in there at therapeutic dosages, actually. Vitamin E and A and all those flavonoids. So, really having that variety from seafoods, fruits and vegetables, it's going to go a long way. And joy for all you sort of chocolate lovers out there. Dark chocolate is actually shown to be really rich in polyphenols, and it's a great way to sort of, bolster up your cognition as well as caffeine. Again, just caveating it, I mean, we're not sort of talking about sort of Red Bull and your 12 glasses of espresso here. Everything in moderation is key. But yeah, not only is it great for inflammation and sort of cognition, but it's also great for cardiovascular health because of the polyphenol profile within caffeine and dark chocolate. I just wanted to have a little bit of a quiz here. So we might want to bring up the chat box here. I don't know, that might be useful for you all to get involved. Yeah, so I'm going to throw out some questions here to see what our key takeaway points is. Has everyone got access to the chat box there? Just ping me yay or nay, and then I'll get going with some of these questions. Perfect. Right. Okay, great. So question 1, blueberries are the best food source of antioxidants. Fact or fiction? Interesting. Okay, great. It's actually fiction. All sorts of foods contain antioxidants, and that's the best bank for antioxidants, actually. So you can get them from, pretty much all foods that we're saying, but the ones that hold a substantial amount, you're right in that respect, are the berries, the dark berries, and that's what's had the most studies carried out. Question 2. You must get 8 hours of sleep to get the best productivity. True or false? Fact or fiction? Yeah, I think that one's been kind of drilled in. Yeah, it's definitely a great benchmark to go with. And it's not always possible, especially with those with young children and this lifestyle that we've just taken on being on the hamster wheel. It's not always kind of achieved, but that's definitely the benchmark we want to be aiming towards. It's just, even if there's one change that we want to focus on, even before nutrition, it is getting a good sleep routine, getting that 8 hours and before midnight, actually, because that resets your body clock. And then what then follows is better food choices, reducing inflammation. So that would be my sort of my go-to, actually. The first thing to start on if you're doing any lifestyle change is just regulating your sleep pattern, going to bed a little bit earlier each night until you're getting sort of the 8 to 9 hours that we want to be sort of aiming for. The next question: eating chocolate on a daily basis will support brain health. Fact or fiction? Yeah, that's joy for all you chocolate lovers, including me. That's fact. But again, that's the studies have been carried out on dark chocolate because obviously that's richer in the polyphenols. It helps cognitive performance and with mood, actually. But again, that's with context, maybe not a whole bar of maybe milk chocolate, but a few small chunks of dark chocolate, and you get some gorgeous flavors out there, actually. Will take you a long way every day. Next question: fish oils will always boost brain functioning for everybody. Fact or fiction? Yay. Okay, it's fact for those in inflammation, but it's fiction for, that's not a principle applied across the board. So if you're an otherwise healthy individual, there's very little beneficial properties you're going to gain from a supplement, and you're probably going to get that from your whole food diet. If you're healthy and you're sort of meeting all your nutritional needs, there's very little evidence to support that a supplementation is going to benefit you. The beneficial properties are going to benefit somebody who's in a state of chronic inflammation, especially for inflammation of the brain, in cognition, cardiovascular health. But yeah, that's a good one to sort of recall. If you've got a whole food diet and you're reaching all your targets with your nutrients and macronutrients, there's probably not much a supplement will add to. Next question: protein intake will improve your mood. Fact or fiction? Oh, mixed bag there. Yeah, no, protein, actually, that's a fact. It will provide us with the essential building blocks for what our body needs, including our antioxidant defense system and our neurotransmitters like serotonin. And it's really going back to sort of like what I was saying earlier on about not having too much of any one thing isn't always a great way to go. With protein, if you're having too much, especially in animal protein, it can really sort of push your body towards a state of inflammation. And also it can help your, not help, but it can sort of push your body towards storing excessive fat if there's too much protein consumption going in. So as with anything, it's got to be relative, and it's got to be sort of, what's appropriate for your body. The general rule, I can't even get my words out. So the general rule of thumb is about 20 grams of protein per meal. Again, there's nuances there. So if you're sort of weight training, that's going to go up. If you're a child, that's going to go down. So it's all sort of in perspective. Next question: aerobic exercise versus anaerobic exercise. Which one's better? Sorry, let me rephrase that, because just to make it easier for the chat box. Aerobic versus anaerobic exercise. Which one's better? Is better for mental health? Is that true or false? I'll go again. I probably didn't get that one out properly. Aerobic exercise versus anaerobic exercise is better for mental health. Right. Okay. Yeah, that one's false. Much of the research is showing sort of any form of exercise. And it all kind of depends on what your fitness level is as well. So someone who's just started off on sort of like the fitness journey, or, just really struggling to sort of get exercise into the routine, a walk outside is going to really calm the nervous system down and reduce inflammation in a massive way. But then irrespectively, sort of on the other spectrum, if someone's got exercise routine in their daily lifestyle, things like HIIT training has a lot of research around it to show actually it reduces inflammatory markers. It's supportive of many chronic conditions, especially sort of cardiovascular health, mental health. It lifts your mood. Any form of exercise that you can manage is going to raise those endorphins and get you feeling great about yourself. It's going to motivate you. So whatever floats your boat, it's, give that a go. Next question. Hydration. It's the biggest contributor to how productive we are. True or false? Yay, we've got lots of truths coming in there. Perfect. Yes, that's right. It sort of not only regulates blood pressure and gives us lots of energy and sort of alleviates fatigue, it actually flushes out and detoxifies anything that we're recirculating in our body that we really want to get rid of. I don't know if any of you are Bear Grylls fans, but a great rule of thumb to remember is the rule of 3 that he constantly just, is drumming in. So you can survive 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, actually, and 3 minutes without air. So hydration is a real key point for reducing inflammation. But thank you for everyone who took part in that Q&A. Finally, let's go. Last slide. I can just, there we go. Thank you all for joining us. I hope that's been sort of helpful. I've got my details there. Please feel free to drop me an email. You can go on my website and book a free complimentary health review under the Discovery Call section. My website's just being revamped, so it's called Discovery Call. I would love to be able to offer you some tips and suggestions to help you feeling more in control of your health again. And just to know how your individual experiences have been. And my key takeaway point tonight would be, please remember you're more than your diagnosis. Get connected with the fun and, all the things that you love about yourself. And all these measures are here to support you in your management moving forward. I'm going to pass you back to Natalie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that was absolutely fantastic, Kay. Honestly, every time you speak with such passion, and you give some incredible gems on how we can adopt and maintain a healthy lifestyle. So thank you so much for joining us. I was literally scribbling notes down about changing my own diet, and I'm definitely going to be consuming more dark chocolate, that's for sure. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure.
So we did have one question come in, so I'll just share that with you.
Mm-hmm.
And her mum's diet affects our vitiligo, whereas Anjana says it's stress, which we do know is a contributing factor. But she says beetroot often eaten before breakfast daily may help. Do you know whether this is true?
Sorry, I really missed the beginning part of your question, Natalie. Sorry.
So Anjana says her mum says that diet affects our vitiligo, whereas Anjana believes it's stress. Her mum says beetroot often eaten before breakfast daily may help. Do you know whether there is any truth in this?
Definitely. It's multifactorial, as with anything. Diet absolutely affects all conditions, vitiligo, autoimmunity, and absolutely stress does. So we can all have a genetic affinity towards certain conditions. However, stress will be the thing that sort of triggers it. So it's a combination. It's not one or the other. So that's a really good question, actually. And with regards to the beetroot, I haven't seen any research out there to endorse that, but that's not to say it's not true. And it's not to say beetroot isn't great for vitiligo. It absolutely is. It's great for digestion. And we know if we're supporting our digestion, because digestion starts in the mouth, and our hydrochloric acid levels, we're going to be metabolizing things a lot better and reducing that inflammation load. And we're going back to think of sort of antioxidant polyphenols and reducing inflammation overall. So I definitely would keep the beetroot in, but I haven't seen any sort of clinical research to sort of say, yes, it's absolutely right to have before breakfast or not. But if it's working for you, I would say stick with it.
Brilliant. Just got another question as well. Do you have a concise list of recommendations for what to eat versus what to avoid?
Absolutely. The list is so tailored for each person. So what works for one person might not necessarily work for another. And that's why in clinic we kind of have sort of consultation to find out what's actually going, because everybody's gut is so different. So someone might be suffering with IBS alongside the vitiligo, and you know that list will be completely different to someone who's dealing with a bacterial infection within their gut, sort of compromising digestion alongside the vitiligo. But the general rule of thumb is, yes, we can have a sort of list for about 6 to 8 weeks, which we kind of work on removing certain triggers that cause inflammatory processes, but we want to generally get people eating pretty much everything, a whole food spectrum of foods. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't sort of give a direct list because it is so individual and unique to each person.
Okay, thank you. And Aria, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Another question. Her 2-year-old has vitiligo. Any tips for dealing with a child and nutrition considerations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really tough with children because you've got the double whammy of having the pressure of making sure you're wanting to get the diet right. I would say, yeah, I mean, please get in touch with me. I'm happy to talk some tips in there because we really want to support the gut, and with children that can be a little bit more tricky. So please DM me. I'm happy to have that chat with you. But just get them introduced to all sorts of fruits and vegetables. Make it fun for them, and not sort of get so fixated on having certain foods only to support the vitiligo. Because again, we want to get that sort of diversity there from a gut perspective, and that's going to bolster their immune system. And kids are so resilient; their immune systems are completely sort of changing all the time, and they repair so quickly. And so the more food groups you get into the diet, the better it's going to be. So it's going to give them less space for the inflammatory foods like your high sugar yogurts, your high sugar chocolates. So I would say keep things like that, but please do get in touch, and I'm happy to go through that with a little bit more depth with you. Thanks for that question.
Fantastic. I think that's it for the question. Thanks very much, Kay. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.